Today I'm going to show you how to build a tabletop war game using nothing but LEGO. Imagine Warhammer, but instead of Space Marines we're using LEGO World War II minifigure armies, with their own health bars, custom dice, a battlefield literally made from LEGO, and a set of rules based around studs.
Nope.
Studs are used for health bars, movement, range, and it's all determined by the roll of a custom LEGO dice and then measured with a custom LEGO ruler. I'm going to show you how to make all of it. And of course, whilst I'm choosing to do this with World War II LEGO armies, you can use whatever LEGO minifigures you want. And needless to say, this is going to be a large, very large project, and it's quite complicated. But frankly, I do think this has got a lot of potential. So, I guess just, yeah, I'm quite excited to see how it turns out. Because I don't know if it's even going to work yet. I shouldn't say that. It's going to go great. Okay, so let's break this down one step at a time. Of course, I will also put them in the description because it's going to be pretty word heavy. So let's get started with the armies. On one side will be a LEGO World War II German army, and on the other will be a LEGO World War II American army. To keep things simple, these armies are almost exactly the same. The German army has 10 riflemen. It also has 5 elite infantry, 1 anti-tank specialist, and a Panzer III LEGO tank. Now, each of those categories is unique. Some of them do more damage, some of them move further, some of them have more health. But once again, to keep things simple, we'll get into that later, but let's just establish the fundamentals. So next, let's introduce the Americans. The American army also has 10 riflemen, 5 elite infantry, an anti-tank specialist, and an M4 Sherman LEGO tank. Crucially, both teams are also going to have a commander, and as we'll find out later on, this is basically the most important piece. You must defend it or you lose the game. So hopefully at this point you're still with me. I know it's going to be a lot of information, and I've done my best to communicate it clearly. First, you need to create your game board. For this, I'm going to use 2 green base plates, and then I'm going to fix them together using these green plates. Again, this is just an example to explain how this all works. First, I'm going to take 1 German rifleman and stick him at one end of the game board, and then I'm going to take an American rifleman and stick him at the other side of the game board. Now let's imagine for a second we're playing the game and it's the American's turn first. In this game, he can move and also attack, which is precisely why we've got different colored dice here. Now, the white dice is rolled to determine movement. In other words, how far the American can travel across the game board. That can then be measured on the game board using this white ruler where we just count out the studs. So let's say, for example, he manages to roll a 10. You then count out 10 studs, which is this second red bit here, and then he can move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There we go. Job done. Simple enough. Then we also have a black dice, which is used to determine attack, both whether or not the attack actually hits the opponent and then how much damage is actually dealt. Every turn, a player has both a set number of movement orders and a set number of attack orders. So let's do this properly, and let's start with a movement order for the American. Let's roll the die. Oh, well, I've just encountered an unforeseen problem where that is both 4 and 1. So I guess anytime that happens, I'll probably make a new dice, but anytime that happens, just roll it again until you get a number that, oh my god, roll it again. So he's rolled a 5. Now that 5 means he can travel 5 studs. Also, remember to bring his health bar with him. Okay, so the American has advanced ever so slightly towards the enemy. Now that the American's moved into position, let's move to attack. Now before the attack begins, we first need to make sure he's within range of the enemy. And we can do that by using these black rulers over here. For the sake of this tutorial, let's just pretend that this is the range of the minifigure. And we lay this next to him here, which again, you line up with the front of his feet, and then you can see, yes, okay, the enemy is within range. Now, if you had a minifigure with, I don't know, a smaller range, for example, somebody who had a shotgun, maybe you could use this one, or maybe somebody's got, I don't know, a pistol and they could use this one. Again, for the sake of this demonstration, we're just going to say that that is what his range is and he can attack the enemy. And now we need to roll a 3 or up in order for the attack to actually land. Okay, right, great. Well, fortunately, I have another. Let's roll this one instead. Okay, I'm going to call that a 4. Now we need to determine how much damage is actually going to be done. We're once again going to use the black dice because this is attack. Now, let's say, for example, you roll a 1. What that means is you do 1 stud of damage to the enemy. And this is where the health bars you can see here come into play. If we do 1 stud of damage, we then take 1 stud off of that minifigure's health bar. He's now only got 9 studs of health. But let's do it properly, just for argument's sake. Let's roll the black dice to determine how much damage is going to be dealt. It's a 6. So what we do is we take this German minifigure and then we count out 6 studs of damage, which is actually actually a lot of damage, and as you can see, he's now only got 4 studs of health, so obviously, if he was then attacked again, and let's say it wasn't a 1, let's say it was a 5, he would then die because he has no more studs remaining. Now imagine that concept with a proper game board, a lot more minifigures, tanks, different types of minifigures, just a lot more going on. But for now, those are the very basics. Again, later in the video, I'm gonna get into a lot more detail about the specifics. But first, I want to show you how you can create your own LEGO tabletop war game using basically whatever LEGO you've got available. It can be as simple or as complicated as you want to make it. A moment ago, you watched me create a very basic foundational LEGO war game using these 2 green base plates. However, if you want to take yours that didn't quite work. However, if you want to take your war game to the next level, this is how you can do it. This is a modular LEGO tabletop war game battlefield. I really need to get a better name for that. Basically, you can swap out whichever parts you want at any time. Now, each of these modules is simply a 16 by 16 or whatever parts you've got available. These are 2 16 by 8s. They're joined together, and then you just organize them however you want. You can also connect them together, and it just kind of holds it together so it doesn't all jiggle and move around. And if you happen to be sitting here thinking, well, this is just unbelievably boring and completely uninteresting, fear not, because there is a fix for that. One way you can make it more interesting is simply by adding a bit more detail to each of your modules, like this here. Now let's imagine, instead of just a completely dark green base like we've got for the rest of it, imagine all of it looks like this, much more interesting. Another way you can liven up the build and just give it a bit more depth is by putting like these features. Again, these are entire solid modules, and again, if I want to swap that out, I simply pull this along, drop that in here, and slide that back into place, and now we've got a crater as well as like a detailed module over here. Now, for those of you building your game boards using just single plates, or you're doing it on, for example, a base plate, there's another alternative solution. It doesn't require a big module. Another way you can do it is by using what I'm calling overlay parts. I kind of just made that up on the fly, to be honest. Basically, these are really small plates that you've kind of pre-built some terrain onto, and then you can place them literally wherever you want to, anywhere on the build, and it's just going to give you a little bit more of an interesting terrain and make your battlefield a bit more dynamic, because now this is partial cover, and you could call these partial cover as well. It makes it more strategic. But that isn't even it. You can still build in larger elements. Now, because this follows the same dimensions as the rest of the modules, essentially you can see it is, for all intents and purposes, it's just 2 modules joined together, which again just gives us that ability to swap this out. Let's say, for example, we want to move this part over there, and then we want to make a bit of room down the center because we want this to be more interesting. You could even just use this and call it ruins if you really wanted to. You can do whatever you want, but you can see, because it's just 2 modules, it now fits the same size. So you can create as many modules, as many overlays, as much as you want to, and then you just fit it in wherever works best for your battle. Now, one consideration you might want to make is you want it to be evenly distributed. You want the game board to be balanced, okay? Because this has got a lot more cover that's closer to this team than it would be the other team. So what we can do, because we've got it 6 modules long, we can put this sideways, put it in the middle ground like that, and now neither team has a strategic advantage. Again, we can then just slot the rest of our parts back in like so. And then we can take the overlays that I showed you earlier, and let's just, I don't know, let's dot them around. Let's get one here. They don't even have to be fixed on, but you can gently press them on just so it holds its position, but it's really not that important. Now, hopefully you'll agree this is a bit more interesting. Now imagine the rest of it was detailed like this. The church was fully built. We also had more crater modules like this distributed around. You can see it gives you incredible flexibility, and you can basically, the sky's the limit. You can do whatever you want. Hopefully slowly but surely this is beginning to make sense, and now I'm going to start trying to flesh things out in a lot more detail, and this is where things are going to start getting a bit more complicated. That's the basics. Now we're going to get specific. These are our 2 minifigure armies, and we're going to start talking about how the minifigures are different. Again, we've got riflemen, we've got elite infantry, we've got an officer, we've also got anti-tank. Now each of these classes has their own characteristics, so let's try and explain this as clearly as possible, for which I have prepared an thing. If you look over here, you can see we have 3 main infantry type. We've got the riflemen, we've also got elite infantry, and we've got an anti-tank specialist. The red shown here is to indicate the range that can fire. The rifleman, the basic rifleman, can fire this distance. I believe it's 32 studs, and if you remember, we prepared rulers to show the range. You see I line this up next to them, you can see that's the distance that those can fire. In fact, it's 36 studs. However, the elite infantry and the anti-tank anti-tank specialist can only fire 24 studs, which again, we've got a ruler for here. And then again, if we line it up next to the anti-tank guy, you'll see again, he can only fire 24 studs. Now, there's no point mentioning the officer class because they can't even fire a weapon. They're simply a target to kill. So it's just 3 main infantry classes. So let's get down into the specifics. As you can see, all infantry have all got 10 studs of health. As we just discussed, the riflemen, the most basic of which both armies have 10 riflemen, have a range of 32 studs. The riflemen do 1 times normal damage, meaning if we roll a 6, they will do 6 studs of damage to the enemy's health bar. Now, the elite infantry, as we just discussed, have a range of only 24 studs. However, the elite infantry also do double damage, which means if they roll a 5, it will do 10 studs of damage to the enemy, in other words, one-shotting an enemy soldier. The anti-tank infantry also has only a range of 24 studs. However, it will do triple damage to an enemy tank, but if it's attacking infantry, it will do normal 1 times damage. Once again, the officer doesn't need range or damage because he doesn't fire a weapon. Now, at this point, you might have been wondering the whole time why we even have anti-tanks. That's because, of course, we have tanks. Both armies will be equipped with a tank. The Germans will be using a Panzer III. The tanks will have a range of 48 studs, which again, we've also got one of these measuring sticks for. You can kind of see, makes it really easy. You always measure from the front of the vehicle or the minifigure, but to make life even easier, I'm going to mark it out for you. That right there is the range of a tank, which actually, come to think of it now, is basically the entire board. I might need to reconsider that. What makes a tank unique is that it doesn't just have 10 studs of health like the infantry do. It has 40 studs of health, which is why we're using 2x2 circular plates, which obviously 1 plate equals 4 studs. Now we know the range, the damage, and the health of all of the infantry and also the tank. Now imagine for a second you take those few minifigures we've got there, and now you put the entire army onto the board, and you can only move 5 pieces per turn or attack 5 pieces per turn. Some have high damage but low range, some have high range but low damage, so you basically have to choose which pieces to move and what to prioritize. Essentially, it's just Warhammer.
24 hours later.
What you can see rising in the background behind me is a lovely new standing desk, which I was going to use to place all my modules and actually show you how the battle might work. You may spot a fatal flaw, and that is that literally the desktop never arrived. They just didn't send it. So all I've got is I've got a nice moving piece of metal. I am, however, excited to see how that works. When we actually record the battle against another person in here, I will use that desk for the war game tabletop. I really need to figure out what I'm going to call it, but regardless, let's detail the modules and then reassemble everything together. Okay, so these ends should just slide around like so. Now that I've created the template, the border, the outline of the game board, I now need to just choose what I put inside. Now, instead of creating the entire church, I've just decided to, well, basically to save time if I'm being completely honest, I've decided to make it a church ruin, and again, to keep it balanced, because it is a 4x6 and this is the center, I'm gonna put the church module there. This will be important later when we start talking about cover, partial cover, and no cover. Either side of the church, I'm gonna slot in one of these, just kind of blank pieces here, another one there. Let's put a crater over here, then I'll fill in, if you tell you what, actually, let's put the crater in the middle. Let's put the crater in the middle, and we'll do something else with this bit of land over here, so that there's basically this cover on both parts. Now, hopefully you'll agree that the game board looks a little bit more interesting. It's not quite as bland and boring as it used to be, but it still could be a lot better, and yeah, we're missing a part. I'm not gonna lie. I forgot I was supposed to build something on there. I have forgotten to do that, so instead I'm just going to put this one here. Now, there's 1,000,001 different ways we can make it more interesting, but one of the ways I'm going to do it is by using these pre-built trees and just dotting them around the outside of the game board. And I've got a couple of different options to choose from here. Some of them have got dark leaves, some of them have actually got like autumn and almost winter time leaves. Something like that, again, just makes it a bit more of a dynamic battlefield. And now for the moment of truth. Let's finally get the armies onto the game board, and we will probably have to start with the tanks. And let's, I guess, just start by getting the tank over here. In fact, let's get both tanks down first, like so. For the Americans, they're gonna be using a Sherman. Again, this game board might not look that big, but remember, of course, we have got our own measuring tools to make sure that everyone's actually within range. So, for example, this is the range of one of the tanks from the front of the, I guess from the front of the hull, I guess. From the closest point of the hull, you can see he's not within range. And he's also kind of behind partial cover as well. So you can use the rulers to indicate who's behind cover and who's not behind cover, just because it shows you what their line of sight is going to be. Now, let's start getting down the armies. Okay, that's the Americans in position. Now let's move over to do the Jerry's. Now that you can see what it actually visually looks like, we're going to get into some of the more specific rules. In order to do this, you preferably would have, like, I don't know, like an area to actually have the battle in the first place, which I was hoping I would have. And you also need a friend, of which I don't have any. I will be recording another video where I recruit one of my brother's friends. That is a depressing consideration. I'm joking, I have friends. Promise. So yeah, you would need a friend. You would need someone to physically do this with. Otherwise, it's like, I don't know, you can maybe program an AI, but I don't imagine that would be very fun. Maybe it would be fun. Who cares? That's besides the point. You and your friend or AI would choose an army. Now, that army could be the exact same like I've got here. However, it's also entirely possible you could choose different minifigure classes. Like, just because I've used rifleman, elite infantry, officer, anti-tank, and a tank, doesn't mean you couldn't use, for example, a radioman, a grenadier, and a flamer. Maybe throw in artillery. I don't know. There's a lot you could do with this. It really comes down to your imagination. Now, let's say for argument's sake that I am the German and my imaginary friend is the American. In order to decide who goes first, I think probably the best way to do it would just be to roll a dice, and whoever rolls higher, I don't even I don't even know what that's closest to. If you get that, just re-roll it. There we go, 6. I rolled a 6, and let's say, for example, my imaginary friend rolls a 4. There we go. That means that because I rolled a higher number, I get to start first. Now, the way I imagined this happening was each time a player has a go, they can move 5 minifigures. For example, let's say I move this guy. Oh, he's taken part of the base plate with him. This guy, and this guy. So I can move 5 minifigures. Again, I would roll my dice to determine how far they go. They went 8. Again, I've also got a ruler down here. I could then measure out 8 studs on that one minifigure, roll again for the next minifigure, and again and again and again. Now, for the sake of argument, let's just imagine that we are going to move only this guy here. So let's roll to figure out what we actually get. That is a 9. I'm glad it actually came out as a number. Now, again, we can use the little ruler thing here to count out 9. So that's 5, that's 5. So come back here, that's 9. So he would move to there. Now, each player would also then have 5 attacks, and we know the range of the rifleman. The range of the rifleman is 36 studs, which is this. Now, because he's not in range, he cannot attack. So again, we could move 5 minifigures. We can also attack 5 times. Now, because this guy's not in range, he can't actually attack anything. However, if somebody was in range, and it's not just forward like this, what you can do is you can pivot this ruler around to get the range to determine whether or not you can actually hit an enemy. Now, this is where it gets a little bit more complicated. Let's say, for example, there's an American, and he is here. Okay, let's say the American is here. As you can visually see, oh, by the way, none of these guys have weapons. I probably should have given him weapons, but I haven't, so deal with it. He's also not got any cover. He's not got anything to hide him from the enemy, which means we have a higher chance of actually hitting him. Because, of course, once we confirm he's within range, we then need to roll the dice to determine whether or not we hit. You could probably get better dice. I kind of just made this myself, so, you know, it is what it is. It's a characteristic of the game, let's say. So because he's got no cover, this American has absolutely 0 cover, what we're going to say is that we need to roll a 3 or higher for our attack to actually land. We landed a 3, or close enough to a 3. That means that the attack will land. So when we roll again, we then deal that much damage to the minifigure. However, if this minifigure was behind partial cover, and what I mean by that is that he is within range, and we do have line of sight on him, but as you can see, only a portion of his body is actually poking out. So we've got a lower chance of actually hitting him. In that case, we then need to roll a 4 or higher in order to hit him, which we have. I'm just really good at this game. So again, my attack would hit the enemy. However, if the enemy is behind or pretty much entirely behind cover, like so, we call this full cover. In the event the enemy is behind full cover, and again, obviously he's within range, we can see he's within range, our attack is not going to, we can't attack that guy. We have to do something else. Now, it has come to my attention that I never showed you how to actually create one of my barely functional dice. And I'm going to show you, just in case for some reason you also want want to build one. It's got a character, okay? I didn't look up any instructions for this. I just absolutely botched it together. And frankly, I'm quite proud of them. So I'm going to show you how it's done. Can I even remember? This is... How do you do this again? Well, okay. Well, those are the parts you need in order to do... These are the parts you need in order to build it. I tell you what I'll do is I'll show you by disassembling one that's already made, because I literally can't remember how I did it. Okay, so under the surface here, all I've taken off there is two 2x4 plates, okay? Underneath that surface, you can see we have these things here. Yes, they are called things. I'm sure there's a technical name for them. I don't know exactly what you would call them. Basically, what you do is you just take your 2x4 plates like this and you lay them on like so. Then what you would do is you'd take your little like numbers and you'd basically just copy what I've done here, essentially. It's pretty straightforward. It's a dice. I'm sure you know what a dice looks like. And then, quite simply, it is like you can see what I've done there. I've kind of created like a shelter. I'll see if the cameras can see. And then all I do, again, this would normally be one color. I don't know why I've done this to myself. All you do is you then do that last side over here. Now that you've got that square, all you need to do is get one of those in there, and you get like one of those either side. You do that, and then there you go. Bob's your uncle. And what I've done here is I've just dropped these in just to kind of pad it out, keep it solid, keep it holding together. That's basically how you make a dice. That is an awful dice, and it's a terrible way of doing it, and I haven't really shown you it very well, but if you want to do it because it's funny, do it my way, and let me know how you get on. Now at this point, you then just go left team, right team, left team, right team, left team, right team. Again, you've got to kill the officer. Everyone has their own ranges, they've got their own health bars, they've got their own special unique abilities, and you kind of got to try and take the ground. I don't know, at this point, it's pretty self-explanatory. Hopefully I've made it quite clear. But don't go anywhere yet, because I'm actually going to do this battle. I'm going to make it much better. Basically, I'm going to finish it and do it properly. Then I'm going to get a desk for that, well, desk, and I'm going to get a friend round, and we're going to stage this battle. LEGO War Game with a custom LEGO War Game board game. Christ, my words. These are words that I am saying, and they are very entertaining and interesting and informative, I will have you know. Yeah, so that's basically how you create a LEGO War Game. Christ, yeah, I'm just going to end the video. Subscribe so you don't miss it. See you in a bit.